Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to OBR Weekly. This is not Quincy Carrier Live. The banner is lying to you. It's OBR Weekly. I'm Barry McBride, I'm publisher of the OBR. That over there, that's Fred Greetham. He's a legend. He has been to Browns training camp and the facilities for years and years and years. He knows of what he speaks, unlike me, and we are going to sit here and explain to you what in the world is going on with the Cleveland Browns, or we're going to try. At any rate, what we're going to do is this is going to be a soapbox edition of OBR Weekly. Usually I come in here with a bunch of questions, and Fred and I talk about them, then we go to your questions. We're going to do entirely your questions, your comments, your reaction, as well as some stuff I brought from ATI to fill in the gaps in case we run into any slow periods. So it's your show. Start hitting us up in the chat rooms with comments, questions, you name it. We will go to it. Fred, how's it going, buddy?
Going pretty good.
Well, that's good to hear.
Speaking for myself.
Well, speaking for yourself, you know.
Nothing going on. We want to talk baseball or what?
Well, I am. I've asked my wife to give me score updates via text as she is watching in the next room. So you don't have to watch the game. You can stay tuned in here to OBR Weekly. We will give you updates if anything happens, and then we'll let you go and watch the last half of the game. If you happen to be a Guardians fan as well as a Cleveland Browns fan, and hopefully you still are a Cleveland Browns fan, even though they are 1-5, with some offensive issues, Fred. Uh, the offense at this point is not looking very good. They are setting records in a very negative way. So let's jump straight into the questions and comments, Fred, if you're up for that.
Sure.
Let's go straight to Fumble 13. Fumble 13 says, is it time to jettison some of the players who won't be here next year? Jacksonville pulled the trigger on a trade today, so is it the time? Are you ready to pull the trigger, Fred?
I want to say another week, because you haven't even started division play yet. I mean, the way it's going, they could lose all six, but, that's where it's all about is winning the division from the beginning. That's what I said. Ravens look pretty good. Steelers look pretty good, but they all look beatable, and who knows? You lose the Bengals, you lose the Ravens. Yeah, then you start, bye, start making moves. But I don't see what that benefits you now, as far as you got to figure out what's going to be your game plan. If you're going to even if you're going to move on from Watson, you got some issues financially, and
Mm-hmm.
you gotta figure out what's the best course going ahead. Everybody wants to just make moves, but you can't do anything drastically, and it depends on what you get. I mean, if you can get something that you can't pass up, but to be honest with you, I don't see a lot of marketable assets. I mean, you might say Amari Cooper might be, the biggest one, but I don't know what you're going to get from him in the last year of his contract. And with I think when they redid the deal, a lot of that money, is on the books for the Browns, not necessarily a team they trade him to.
Right, right. Yeah. What's the best case scenario at this point? The team turns it around and they finish 6-11. I mean, what's the value in splitting the rest of the games at this point with the rough back half of the schedule and getting a middling draft pick? It seems to me that you either turn it around and make a miracle turn right now, or just start looking at 2025. You're 1-5, Fred. I mean, splitting the rest of your games just gets you in the middle of nowhere.
Right. But I'm just saying, I don't know what you're, if you're sure you're not going to have got some of these guys on their rookie contracts or whatever, what are you getting? Are you getting anything for them? Or are you just going to cut them or what? As far as I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, what what the plan is. I don't think this is, I mean, certainly the fans, I didn't see this coming. And they have the same, if not a little better roster, I thought, than they did last year. Humanly speaking, logically speaking, you can say, oh yeah, well they didn't play the best quarterbacks last year. They haven't really played the best quarterbacks yet this year, but
Mm,
the roster is pretty much the same with a few upgrades. It's hard for me to believe that they all just forgot how to play football. We all know the lightning rod's the quarterback, but uh, you know, I think they're just trying to figure out. They're obviously still believing that they can turn it around, or they would not be going with Deshaun Watson again this week. I was on the
right.
press conference today. I know the narrative is Jimmy Haslam's dictating it. I don't think so, because if Jimmy Haslam is dictating this, Kevin Stefanski, I'm hearing people say that he's telling him he has to play Stefanski, but if they don't turn it around, he's going to get fired. Well, if I'm following the orders, then I'm not worried about getting fired, because
Mm,
but if I thought it was the best move to play Jameis Winston, I'd do it, or DTR or whatever. So I don't know. I really don't think Stefanski's sitting there looking in the camera and lying straight, when he said that it's not that it's his decision when it comes to football. With that being said, think about last year. They got Joe Flacco. We all know what he did. You told us, I'm saying the Browns, that you didn't want Joe Flacco back. You didn't invite him back. You didn't offer him a deal, even when he said he wanted to come back. So you went out and got Jameis Winston for about the same money that Flacco ended up signing for, maybe a little more. And it made sense. He's 9 years younger, has a lot of the same skills that Flacco did. But now you're not willing to put him in. It's kind of like the Case Keenum deal. Now, I think
yeah.
Winston's better than Case Keenum, but when Baker Mayfield was clearly injured, Kevin Stefanski really refused to put him in until he had to that one game when Mayfield was declared out. So he is drawing a line that I'm not going with Winston. So that's telling you, we saw what Flacco did. Here's a guy you brought in that you thought was better than Flacco, and you're not doing it for what? A quarterback controversy? I don't get it. I mean, what if Winston went in and played well and they did better than they did with Flacco? Is that a crime? You're still paying Deshaun Watson whether he plays or he doesn't play. So even if, I mean, you're telling us that that's your best chance to win, but if you lose, your season's like basically over. So you should be pulling out all stops to try to win a game any way you can, even if it is Watson. But first sign of trouble, go to Winston or make a change. But it's if they're still riding the same horse, it's hard for me to believe that they think. We've now seen the numbers. You
Mm,
talked last week that you were off the ship. I thought that Watson would be at least an average quarterback. He's coming up with historically bad. We're talking Jamarcus Russell, Achilles Smith. I saw the list that he was like at the very bottom of like 750 quarterbacks in
yeah.
in his performance. So it's like I really can't explain it. I mean maybe somebody can. I just can't believe that a guy like that did what he did in Houston is just totally the worst quarterback to ever play the game. We've seen guys that played at a high level and then they move on from them and they still, are a serviceable backup
Mm.
quarterback or something. But this is crazy numbers.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And like I was saying last week, you have the juxtaposition of a quarterback who is playing at an all-time bad level, and you've got an offensive line that is working with the quarterback to generate all-time record numbers of sacks and sack yardage lost I don't know if they're still on a pace to set the NFL record after last weekend, but I think they got another 5, 6 sacks. So they're probably heading in that direction, right? 5 sacks last week. So, you know, as much as everyone can say it's not all on the quarterback, well, he's getting a lot of help from the offensive line, but that does not excuse the quality of play that we're getting here. The next question we have is from Trey, and Trey says, "Do you release Watson after the season?" Let me go to some information from Jack Duffin, the salary cap guru of the OBR. He says if you cut Watson after the 2nd of June in 2025, the 2025 cap hit is $83 million. The 26 cap hit is $89.6 million. If you keep him on the roster in 2025 and then cut him in March of 2026, the 2025 cap hit is $37 million. The 2026 cap hit is $46 million. And the 2027 cap hit is $89.5 million. So basically, if you cut him the 2nd of June in 2025, you really get hit hard the next 2 years. If you keep him till March 2026, you get a milder hit the next 2 years, and then you get clobbered in 2027. There really is no good answer here, Fred.
Well, I think the best option that I saw, if you call it the best option, was just keep him on the roster. You could do you remember the last year the Texans had him? He was just inactive every game. They just paid him to stay away. And
Right.
after he demanded the trade, little did everybody know all what was going on in the background. But I think that was even 46 million a year for, just play out your contract, just they've paid 3 of the 5 years, but I think 46 and 46, if I read what he said, even if you just made him inactive or the third quarterback and told him not to show up, if that was the issue. I think that's the other thing that's going on right now with the Browns is they know these numbers and they're trying to make it somehow, some way work, even if it doesn't work this year. If they stay with him and all of a sudden he starts getting up, at least he's an average quarterback again, not an elite, what he's being paid for. But if he was just middle of the road, they would have won probably at least 2 games, if not 3, because the team's not scoring 20 points. They scored 22 points, they would have won 3 more games. They'd have scored 21 points, they would have won 2 more games. So it's not like crazy. We've looked at the Raider game where it wasn't clearly his fault that they didn't score because of the drop touchdown pass, and and you could say some of the same things last week, the mistakes, and so I'm not apologizing for the guy, but looking from their aspect, if he's just middle of the road, and even if you get him to the middle of the road, but you have another option to go get a better quarterback, you keep him on the roster, even if you don't want him around, for as an inactive. It seemed like, if I read that right, that was almost the best option, of instead of cutting or trading them. It's like they really get drilled if they do those type of things. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what on the other aspect, you can't, all of us watching, it's like Stefanski's telling us you can't believe your eyes, your lying eyes. Bill Belichick used to always say to us, I can only go by what I see. And we all know it, that he cut Bernie Kosar because he said he had diminished skills, handled it totally bad. But that was the right move, as far as if he was just looking at football. It wasn't for the team because just the way it all panned out, he was trying to tell you that Todd Philcox was better than Kosar, and we all knew that wasn't true. But when you look at this, we all can see a horrendous product out there, at the quarterback. He goes 11 for 12 in the second half. That kind of looks similar to that Baltimore game last week, but they didn't score the points. It might have looked better if they would have won that game, certainly. But, it's 1-5, and it's on the quarterback. It's on all of them. So I have to think deep down they don't they're not that naive, and they're not saying, Deshaun Watson's really that great. That's also telling you that you don't think that much of Jameis Winston or DTR if this is
Mhm.
your best option.
Right, right. It just smacks of desperation to me, Fred. I mean, they're just throwing him out there, hoping that he turns it around. You know, if I hear 11 of 12 in the second half one more time, my brain is going to explode. I know that he had a fairly good second half, but we didn't score any points, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the
Yeah.
bottom line is you have to put points on the scoreboard, throw in short screens and high percentage passes and all that sort of stuff is fine, but you have to put points on the scoreboard. The Browns were unable to do it, and they once again did not crack that glass ceiling of that iron dome, as someone put it in the chat the other day, of 20 points, even with a defensive touchdown. Just mind boggling. Um, all right, let's keep going on the questions that show up in the chat, as well as the stuff that we're getting from ATI. A comment from Will. Let's see how you respond to this here. He says Deshaun Watson was a top 5 every statistical category for all of his career. Kevin Stefanski gets him. Welcome to the basement. So Will has a point of view here, not favorable to Kevin Stefanski. Fred, do you think that there's a possibility that this is a coach quarterback mismatch, or do you think it has more to do with the layoff and how the game has changed around Deshaun Watson during all of his time away from the game?
Well, I think it's clearly, and they admitted that it wasn't working Kevin's first or 2 years with Watson. So I think, made the move to Dorsey to try to go the other direction and getting back to that elite quarterback that he was. And it's went just the opposite. And that's where I've been saying, why don't you just go back to what you were doing last year before, just because they were at least scoring. The lowest they scored when Watson played was 22 points last year. That was in that
Mm,
loss to the Steelers. That would have
right.
won you a couple more games. So I don't know. Maybe it was a precursor yesterday. They kind of went back to the run, even though Jerome Ford got hurt and was out. You got Nick Chubb coming back. Maybe between Chubb, Strong, and Foreman, you can try to shorten the game and just go back to more of a run-oriented team instead of a pass-oriented team. That was what their plan was. And I can't explain it. I mean, the game, 3 or 4 years, but it's not like Deshaun Watson's 40 years old, or even 35 like Russell Wilson. Deshaun Watson just turned 29. He should just
Mm-hmm.
be physically in his prime. I think it's a confidence issue. You talked about it, you're about processing, making quick decisions. For
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason, he's just not on it, on quick decisions. It seems like by the time he's ready to pull the trigger, he's on the ground. And
Right.
I can't explain it. These guys watch this every day in practice and on film. They get paid to figure it out. And so far they haven't figured it out. It's been 6 games, almost identical stats if you look at QBR rating and
Mm-hmm.
everything. It's pretty much at the bottom. And when I said before, if he was only average, middle of the road, the best he's been in any week was 21st in the QBR rating ESPN does. That was this week. Okay. That's not in the top, that's not in the middle. That's in the bottom third. So, he's just got to get better. And it's a lot of it's because they're not scoring points. He's not throwing any touchdown passes. And, it it is just really getting, to the point where I think it's wearing on some of the players, where they're feeling like they don't have a chance to win. I know a lot of these guys, Deontay Foreman spoke to us today and he was glowing. He says, I don't know what, he says, I think Watson's getting a raw deal. It's not all on him. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing from the coaches, drop passes, missed blocks, sacks. But you see other quarterbacks when things aren't going well, kind of lift their team up, even if they are getting knocked down. And I think I made the illustration last week. I think the year Watson led the NFL in passing with 4,800 yards, he was sacked 62 times. He was on a bad team. They were 4-12. Well, so
Right.
this is a bad team. And you'd think he'd be getting 300 or 400 yards in a losing effort, but he's still putting up 100 to 125 yards, and they're still losing and not scoring any points.
Right. Interesting comment from McLothan here. Love the name. He said, just look at how Watson used to play in Houston. Same style, almost mirrors itself. He's just not making the plays now. Sort of ties into the comments about processing time. It's almost like the NFL is sped up, but Deshaun Watson's playing the same game he played in Houston, a theory that we've talked about here a couple of different times. From a coaching perspective, you can't stand in his ear and yell, think faster, react faster. You have to design the offense to make things a little bit quicker, make reads a little bit quicker for him, and things along those lines. I would think very difficult to do in today's NFL, I would imagine.
Well, I remember those games when he was with Houston against the Browns. Seemed like he ran around back there and he just fired like 50-yard bombs, and they had speed merger. They had DeAndre Hopkins would just go get the ball, and it was just like a track meet, kind of like what you're seeing with C.J. Stroud and Jaden McDaniels. I think that's what they were expecting, was a seasoned quarterback with those skills, mobile skills. And that's why they gave up so much. And I think they're still like living in this dream that it's in there somewhere. And right now, they don't know how to get out from under, because they know the alternative. When they walk away from Watson, which most of us think they should be doing, you just don't have the answer to replace, a quarterback. That's why the Browns have been in this situation. We've covered it since 99. They haven't had, a guy they felt could win a Super Bowl since maybe back to the Bernie Kosar days. Now, some people say, well, Baker Mayfield. Well, I think Baker Mayfield is a different player now. He grew up when he left and became, I think he got humbled by getting traded 2 or 3 times and not wanted. And now he's made the most of his chance down there in Tampa. So, who's to say you unload Watson and he goes back to wherever it was? I don't know if that's going to happen. But, yeah, I think it's so unfortunate because, as we've said over and over, the fans of the Browns are left holding the bag, because
Yeah.
if you start over again, let's say you tank it, you just play, let's empty the bench, trade everybody, and let's get a 2-15 year so you can get the number 1 pick in the draft. Is there any guarantee they're going to get a quarterback that is going to come in and light it up? How many times does the number 1, number 2 guy, Justin Fields or Mitch Trubisky or whatever, not pan out? And Andrew Berry, I don't know. I haven't seen him pick a quarterback, high, but you look at some of the first round picks he had. I think the highest was the Jed Wills. That wasn't a very good pick compared to what was available. And, and you think of John Dorsey pick Baker Mayfield when he had, guys like Josh Allen there. Even Sam
Right.
Darnold now is resurrecting Lamar Jackson. So it's just fortunate, but there's no guarantee you're going to be able to find the guy you're looking for in the draft. Again, you got to be picking in the right spot. And sometimes, unless you're the number 1 pick, you can't even get who you want.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if that perfect guy is out there in this draft. There's no Joe Burrow obvious pick sitting out there that is a slam dunk, at least, as far as I know. I'm no draft expert. Trey wants a cornerback / wide receiver. Would be exciting player to have on your team, that's for sure. But I don't know if he'd solve the Cleveland Browns' biggest issue, which is quarterback. Tell you what, lots of comments going on in the chat room. not a lot directed at us, a lot of internal discussion here. If you have any questions for us, let us know, and we will put them up on the screen. But a lot of arguing back and forth about what is the cause of the Cleveland Browns problems in the chat rooms that I can see. But if you got anything for us, feel free to feel free to fire away. And there's the world's fastest fat man. He's got our internal discussion buddy. Raul Havana wants us to sign Cody Kessler. Uh, I don't think he's the answer at this point, but he is available. I'm pretty sure he is
You know
available.
what's disheartening is the 16-17 year with Hugh Jackson. They were trying to lose. They went 1-31 basically, and got Myles Garrett and Baker Mayfield, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb. Some of the guys that are the nucleus of the team now, David Njoku. But like I said, you still didn't get the answer that you've been looking for. That was what you were trying to accomplish, is get the quarterback. You thought you had it in the guy you took. And I still think he could have stayed here if he would have handled things a little more grown up.
Right.
But that's past history. You're never going to really know everything. But as far as that's it, is in a nutshell. And the other thing is the Browns have turned things around for the most part, at least through last year. But the legacy, what Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, they're all going to be tied to forever, is this trade for Deshaun Watson. They had to bring that to the owner. Of course, the owner had to pay for it, but there's no way that I will believe that the owner said, you got to go get this guy at all costs, because they could have said no. They could have talked him out of it if that was even the case, but I don't believe it. I've been told that was not the case. That I believe that whether Stefanski or whether Barry or whatever a scout said, this is a scenario that could happen and let's go for it. After he turned them down, they might have said, hey, we got another plan. If we back up the Brinks truck, what do you think? He might have said, oh, okay, do what you got to do.
Right.
And that I can see that, but I don't think he's pounding the table out of the blue and said, oh, okay, they had to do that.
Yeah, I didn't hear any homeless guy stories from Haslam when it came to Watson. He rolled out the show to try to make it acceptable and publicly acceptable as a pickup, but did not claim credit for making that particular pick. Rob says it's crazy how Browns pundits don't think there's a QB to be picked when the last two drafts have shown to have produced some exciting talent. That's very true. Jane Daniels was not the first pick. C.J. Stroud was not the first pick. And they have produced and they've done very, very well. Where you're wrong is if you're referring to me as a Browns pundit, you're absolutely wrong. I am not a pundit. I'm a dork with a website. That's it. But maybe there's a guy out there. Maybe it's Quinn Ewers. I don't know. Maybe it's Cam Ward. I don't claim to be a draft expert.
Well, he could be, maybe referring to me. I'm just saying,
yeah, probably.
I'm not an NFL draft guru. I don't really even pay attention too much to college football until they get, first of all, the Browns haven't drafted for 3 years in the first round.
Right.
But right now, I didn't think they were going to be looking for a quarterback. I hear about guys, but I don't know. I heard about Deion Sanders' son, that he's a mobile quarterback that might fit the bill type of thing. But again, you have to draft in certain places. And I think it's always a lottery, and it's fit into the system. Going back to an earlier question, this thing with Watson really could be because they're trying to put, him in a system that just isn't cut out for him, or the players around him aren't cut out. Maybe the offensive line is geared more for, run blocking, and they're more, the Joe Batone, those type of guys, as opposed to, maybe not the best run blockers, but better mobile pass blockers. And so it's just, there's so many variables. You hear all this. Where do you really pin it on? And like I said, it's as simple. He hasn't played well at all, obviously.
Right.
But would we be in this same discussion if they were 3-3 or even 4-2? Like I said, if you'd have
No.
scored another 4 or 5 points in 3 of the games, you would have 3 more wins. You could actually be like 4-2. And everybody might say, well, we got a problem, but he's going to figure it out. They'll get better. The defense isn't doing what, they were expected to do. I mean, they've been holding teams to like low 20s, but with this offense, it's not enough. So that together is the reason you're 1-5 and poor quarterback play. When he has had a chance to win games at least twice at the end, they weren't able to do it. Again, we keep throwing the asterisk that it wasn't all his fault. I mean, when you think about somebody dropping a pass, or you think about somebody getting a holding penalty that pulled back a 82-yard touchdown that would have won the game, all those things, and you're making excuses and you're 1-5.
Yeah. Yeah. World's fastest fat man, Drew Aller, round 3, baby. I think Drew's just a sophomore, so he's got another year. But I like Drew Aller. I think he's got a lot of potential still. But I'm, like I said, no draft scout. Let's go to Fumble 13. If, and it's a big if, Stefanski pulls the trigger and bitches Watson, do you go straight to DTR and find out what you have? Or do you play Winston for the rest of the year? I think it really depends on how you're doing. Have you won a couple of games? Do you still think do you have a chance to pull off a respectable season, or not? Would be my take on it. Fred, what's your take?
Well, I think that too. I mean, you have 3 games at home until the bye. I think those 3 games will tell a lot of the tale. You'll be at the bye, you'll evaluate. If you lose all 3, yeah, they're pulling the plug and maybe make a lot of wholesale changes. If they won 3, I don't think they will, but it's a whole new ball game. You're 4-5 at the bye, and you'd probably still be on the list of in the hunt. When every year there's teams that are like 4-5 or something like that when they start putting those up. I don't know. If you're 2-7, yeah, you just decide, okay, are you evaluating DTR to be the next quarterback? Or are you looking, is Winston just a 1-year stop? Or do you think he has a chance to be the answer? If you put him in and he does great, it's a different situation than Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is 39, and, you could catch lightning in a bottle again, but they felt they could do everything that Flacco did with Watson or Winston. I'm sorry. If he plays really well and you got something like that, you could say, okay, he's our quarterback going forward. So I don't know what how they evaluate Winston, at this point. Do they just want to give Watson every opportunity before they turn it over, or do they just say it's too far gone? We're going to a guy we know is going to be here because he's only in the 2nd year of his rookie deal.
Right.
And we want to see what we have there, whether it's worth, going all in to get another quarterback next year.
Right. Well, I have been corrected, which is going back to the comment that I'm not a draft scout. I'm a dork with a website. LR is apparently available. He can be drafted this year. I'm advising him to stay in college another year. If I was not an Ohio State Buckeye fan, I think he should probably come out and not refine his skills for another year. But yeah, apparently he is draftable this year. So yeah, man, I like him. At any rate, let's go to comment from Willie. He says Browns have too many older players. Not having those top 5 picks from the trade are killing the salary cap with the Watson contract. Watson barely ranking ahead of the Bengals' disastrous pick, Achilles Smith. I was thinking of Achilles Smith this weekend. There was another Achilles playing, I think, against the Browns, or not against the Browns, but against the Buckeyes. But yeah, he was a pretty bad pick. But what do you think of that, Fred? Are the Browns positioned to try to hold on for another quarterback to come in 2 or 3 years, or do they need to find that guy now because of the age of this roster?
Well, I think obviously you would say in hindsight they were wrong to bring back the same group, thinking basically if we just re-sign our free agents and keep the defense together, and because that's what they did. They didn't really change anything. The only new guy I think is Quentin Jefferson and Michael Hall, who they drafted. On offense, again, you're missing first round picks for 3 years in that Watson trade. Those
Yep.
3 guys should be starters on your team. And I think you didn't have a second round pick at least the first couple years. Well, you did, but you traded one for Elijah Moore. So, that's at least 4 or 5 players that should be pillars of the future. I don't think you can build a great roster with 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round guys long term. They can fill in and be role players, but your first, second round picks are your Pro Bowl players, and you're missing holes because of those picks for sure. And but yeah, they could use a quarterback now, but where are you going to get them? We've been saying this for 26 years. What's their 38 name
problem.
list? Every guy they brought in, well, not every guy, but every time they drafted one the first round, and they did many times, they thought that was the guy. And
Right.
even if we didn't think it was, and so that's what's discouraging, is that there's no guarantee you're going to be able to find a guy. I know Jack Duffin said because Mike Penix down in the Falcons, they're going to be ready to move on from Kirk Cousins. There might be a guy like that, but I don't know if you can count on it. And so you're kind of in a desperate situation. You just got to decide. Do you do like the Broncos and just say, we're done with Russell Wilson, we're going to eat the contract regardless, give him away, like they're paying all that salary to him, and the Steelers have him for like $1 million. They could do the same thing. It'd be a lot more money even than Russell Wilson deal if they feel that's it. But they're just not there yet.
Well, I will agree with that. Tell you what, before we go on here to finish out this show, I want to make sure that we give our proper salute to our friends at Core Home Fitness. You want to go to corehomefitness.com. If you want to be buff and ready like all web dorks are, get their adjustable dumbbells. These are the very best on the market. You can see the racks there. You can see the adjustable dumbbells at work. What you want to do is you want to bring the gym home. You don't want to have to schlep out to Planet Fitness or whatever, wonderful fitness facility in the winter and schlep through the snow and ice and misery to go to some crowded gym. Bring the gym home. Go to corehomefitness.com. They have got the best equipment, according to Men's Health, the New York Times, and Consumers Reports. They have the US-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns, you name it. They know what they're doing. And most of all, these guys support the Orange and Brown Report. They support all the free programming we do via YouTube and Twitch and on X every night for the Cleveland Browns. They rock. They deserve your support. And thank you very much to Core Home Fitness. You can find them at corehomefitness.com. All right, with that upbeat message, let's go to another upbeat message just from Amatora. He says, dropping Watson, getting a top 5 QB in the draft, dropping the dead weight on offense, reload in free agency. You can be competitive again next year. Houston did it last year. Washington doing it this year. So all you got to do is you got to get a CJ Stroud. You got to get yourself a Jaden Daniels. You can reload. It can happen. It's possible. Let's just do that, Fred.
It can. You had Houston was aided obviously because of the Browns,
Yeah.
But I think they got the 2 and 3 pick in the draft, the anchor on their offense and the anchor on their defense. The defensive end with the 3rd pick and Stroud with the 2nd pick. And they were anchors of their team. And, it looks like Daniel's doing the same thing. I mean, yeah, we see it. And that's how the NFL's situated, where you can turn around in a hurry. But like I said, there's some pitfalls in what you have financially that you have to figure out, how to do it. And, I think secretly they're probably looking for an exit plan, looking at all explanations and scenarios. But you just can't, I just keep saying it. Maybe these other teams are lucky, but they just don't grow on trees, that you pick the guy. When they make the pick, they always think they have the guy. And, and I've just seen it. I've talked to people when they got Brandon Whedon and Tim Couch and Johnny Manziel and on and on and on. And we all know what happened. So I don't know if anybody knew CJ Stroud was the real deal, why didn't the Panthers take him instead of Bryce Young? It's what happens every year, and
Right.
I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm just saying, you make the move, you go into desperation mode again, and you have to be picking. I'm kind of done with the 3rd round picks for quarterbacks and hoping you
Yeah.
develop them. You got to get the guy that's as close to the sure shot as you can get. Like if there's a Joe Burrow or there's a Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, those guys, most everybody said those are, I don't know if you say Hall of Fame type quarterbacks or whatever, but as close to the real thing as is. And it's got to match up to the year that you have a pick. Because if there
Right.
is that guy, you got to have the number 1 pick because he's going,
Right.
Or a team's going to trade everything to get that pick.
Right. Right. And the poor Indianapolis Colts stumbling into Peyton Manning, then stumbling into Andrew Luck, and the Cleveland Browns, just stumbling. At any rate, let's go to some of the questions we got out of ATI. This question from Big Dog Daddy 426, not really a football question, but he asked, do the Haslams and Stefanski realize how toxic the stadium will be Sunday if the offense continues the way it has been? A lot of people have been asking why don't the Browns make some sort of a switch now, given how negative the environment at the stadium will be, Fred. You've seen a lot of home games from the press box. Does this situation remind you of other situations in the past where the town is sort of turned against the team and is very upset with the way things are going and things could turn sour in a big hurry?
I remember, there's been times, I remember Derek Anderson got booed, and, the fans get excited about the what they're expecting. If everybody thought this was a rebuilding team, it'd be different. But you've been told it's Super Bowl or bust. You have a tough schedule. You have all these tough teams in the AFC, but they're not seeing a very good product. We've seen a bunch of bad football for a long time, and you finally felt like you turned the corner, and now, you're really in a situation where you feel like, is there any hope? I remember the game. I think Tyrod Taylor been playing. They drafted Mayfield, and Taylor got hurt, unfortunately. But they brought in Mayfield off the bench his first play, and it was electric. The stadium was electric. He threw
Mm-hmm.
a deep crossing pass to Jarvis Landry for a completion, and it was like everybody was high five. The hope was there. Here he is, the number one pick in the draft that's going to lead you to the promised land.
Right.
And things were good for a while there. And so it's going to be very interesting because I said all along they were going to pick their spots, obviously, when Nick Chubb was ready, but it would be great for a second half, kind of a re-energized to get, maybe you get through the first 6, 7 games, and you're 4-2 or 4-3, and now you're going into the big games of the schedule, and here comes Nick Chubb out of the tunnel. Well, now Nick Chubb's going to come out of the tunnel probably with a 1-5 team. He's Batman, but I don't know if he's going to be able to wear the cape and
Right.
to put the weight of the whole franchise on him. He's not in a position to do that, and so. Then you got Deshaun Watson. When he's out there, you can almost guarantee the first incomplete. If the first pass he throws is incomplete, you're going to hear the boos, or heaven forbid an interception. So, they've made their bed. Now you're going to have to see. I don't know. The only thing I can see as far as the hope here is you're coming out of or going into the AFC North. The AFC North is your only chance really to get back into it. If you could go 5-1 or 6-0 in the division, maybe you can climb back in with the other teams and have a chance. But it starts Sunday. You got to beat the Bengals, and you probably got to come right back and beat the Ravens, and maybe you can get a glimmer of hope and get it. And so, what better way to do it than to go back to the running games, say scrap this. You got
Mm-hmm.
Chubb, maybe even not at 100%, but Dante Foreman was moving the ball. Pierre Strong was moving the ball, even with Jerome Ford week to week. And you sprinkle in a little Chubb and build that way. Maybe that's what the doctor ordered. Take the pressure completely off of Watson. Take him out of the game, of having to, make plays. He certainly has not made plays enough to win games.
Now, you would think having Chubb in there would at least make them respect the play action, a little bit more. You might have, even if Chubb isn't 100%, he's still Nick Chubb, and he's still in the backfield, and you still got to keep your eye on him. And, maybe that might help the passing game a little bit. Got a question from Rich, and he titled it Losing the Locker Room. His comment was, insiders is being reported now that some veterans want to see a change at QB, and it gives them the best chance to win. Could the pressure be mounting? And although Stefanski said no change, wouldn't there have to be now? I want to ask you, Fred, we've got a coach who has won 2 Coach of the Year awards in 4 years. One during the COVID year, one during a year where he went through 5 quarterbacks. I think to a certain degree that right now, with this Deshaun Watson thing, with him setting all these negative records and Stefanski sticking with him and maybe, some issues internally, we'll see. Players are saying one thing to the media. Maybe there's grumbling internally. Maybe there isn't. Who knows? Do you think this is the biggest challenge Stefanski's faced?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, he's kind of dealt with adversity, and I think that's why he's been successful. He seems like even when things should be good, they weren't quite as good as it seemed. But when things were bad, he kept them competitive. With that injured quarterbacks. The year that Mayfield was hurt. I mean, they were really competitive to the end. I think they finished 7-10. And then last year, obviously, that's why he got the award, because everybody said, man, how do you do that without your quarterback? Well, maybe it wasn't such a great feat now that what we see. But, Dante Foreman today, he sounded sincere that he felt like, man, Deshaun Watson's really a good player, and I've talked to players and I know they're going to talk different in front of a microphone, but I think they're starting to question. Obviously, they're human. They see, or they read and they see all the negative, and so then that's reflecting on them. But I think if anything, they're just head scratching, wonder they can't figure out what's going on. Just like we're watching it and going, how can this guy go? Okay, I understand he led the NFL in passing yardage. How can you? I can see being like middle of the road, but how can you be like the worst quarterback that ever played in the game? You know,
Yeah.
that's what nobody is hard to understand. And like I said, I see him throw the ball. I've seen him since training camp all last year. I don't know. I just That's where I just keep coming back to it's confidence or not really believing in what he's doing. He's more confident when he's not getting hit, but then he's out there getting hit. He looks to run or duck, you know,
Mm-hmm.
before he has a chance for anything to happen. So I think everybody's trying to find the answer to this, and I don't know if there really is one.
Right. Right. Let me go to this comment that was made early by Sean Moody. He said Jimmy Haslam is Art Modell and Jerry Jones on steroids. And I said it was going to be a soapbox edition of OBR Weekly. So, on to the soapbox. Um, I disagree with this comment. I lived through Art Modell. Art Modell was a buffoon, in my opinion. Fred knew him personally, and may have a different opinion about him. I think he was a bad businessman who made Cleveland Browns fans pay for his mistakes. But he was more of a Type A owner. He had his hands in the pie. He tried to run things, to more detail. And Jerry Jones named himself GM down there. Jimmy Haslam did show signs of maybe being a touchy, an owner with his fingers on things. But over the last couple of years, I think he's backed off. I think he learned that lesson and he's let the experts, whether you believe they're experts or not, or the paid professionals sort of do their work. And so I don't think he's that kind of an owner. I think he may have had some of those indicators early on in his ownership, but I don't think he does now. But that's just my take on it. Fred, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, Jimmy Haslam is out at practice almost every day. He comes up some days and shakes my hand, says, how you doing? Small talk. Maybe talk about Tennessee, his college team that he's into, but Art Modell used to drive around in a golf cart and kind of like, hey, I'm here if you want to talk to me about, and he was always holding press conferences. Haslam, we talked to one time at Greenbrier. Every year they kind of do a State of the Union. That was kind of the announce that we extended. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Barry answer those questions. I think he was ecstatic that he finally had guys that he felt he could trust and turn everything over to, and they were young, and let them grow into the job. And the biggest thing now is how he's going to react to this if this continues the spiral it's in, because I don't think anybody saw this coming. I mean, to this degree. And he's, as Jack has pointed out, he's spending over 50 million more on this salary than all the other NFL teams, and it's sustainable because he's willing to turn those into cash bonuses up front and extend the contract. And that's why the Watson thing's, out of hand. And so I really don't know. I don't know. He put a lot of faith in Paul D. Podesta. We asked him if he got extended, and he said, no, but we're working now for Paul to be around for a while, but he's still out. He lives in San Diego and just kind of does his thing from out there. So I don't know. I think he felt like he really had a good group or has a good group to work with, but I have no idea now what he thinks like. But I do know on the aspect of Jerry Jones, I think that he wants to have like the dome and the Jerry's world, kind of like the Jimmy's world, that
Right.
aspect. But if he wanted, Jerry Jones always talking to media. Art Modell was always talking to media. Jimmy and Dee Haslam don't really talk to media
Right.
unless they
Right.
want to they're doing like, they got the Huntington Field and, those type of things. But I think they would rather stay in the, behind the scenes. I mean, like I'm saying, when Jimmy Haslam's out there at practice, the media, we only get 20 minutes. He would come over and say, I'm here to talk to you if he really wanted to. But he doesn't do that. He chooses to just go out and watch practice and stuff. So I don't really think he's seeking the attention media-wise, but I think he's fiercely wants to win, and money's no object. And he thought he did what was necessary by throwing all the money at a lot of these players that Andrew Barry wanted. You can't criticize him for not spending the money. I mean, he's spending more money than any other owner, as far as, according to Jack Duffin.
Yeah. Yeah. He sits back and he writes the checks. That's what you want an owner to do. You don't want him to meddle in the operation of the team. And as far as we know, that's what Hasselman's doing. He's sitting.
What
back
would
and
you
writing the
like
checks.
if he comes out tomorrow and says, I'm done, I'm firing everybody? Where you at? Starting all over again. If
Yeah, well, we've been through that.
If Kevin Stefanski or Andrew Barry says, this was a mistake, we own it. Just like they said, we own the 1-5 record. If whenever that point comes, at middle of the season, after the season, whatever, maybe they learned a lot. And then if you got to start over, that's what you do.
Right.
But
well, World's Fastest Fat Man is going to send us off into the evening here. He says, "Hey Barry, is it possible that we fans are being a touch hyperbolic and emotional, or is the world literally on fire and we are all doomed to die cold and alone?" It depends on which explanation for the universe you accept. Is the universe continually expanding, and we're all going to die cold and alone in a infinite universe, or is the universe eventually going to contract and we're all going to die in a giant ball of fire? Really up to physics to determine the answer to that. As far as the Cleveland Browns are concerned, have a good night, everybody.
Aren't you a ray of hope? I think God's got this. It's in his hands, and I'm not worried about the world coming to an end. Unless he wants it to come to an end, and it'll be in his time. So, yeah, this is football, guys. I mean, you're passionate about it, but whether they go 1-16 or 16-1, it really doesn't affect us other than we feel good and all that. It's a fun escape. But when Ohio State lost the other night, I'm more of a fan of that. It didn't ruin my weekend, Sometimes it is covering this Browns team, but with that said, it is football. We get to talk about it, and it's kind of escapes from reality. It shouldn't. We end up getting more depressed sometimes talking about our hobby.
Yeah, exactly. No, that Ohio State Oregon game, that was a beautiful game. I mean, I'm as a big Ohio State fan as you can imagine, but I just walked away from that saying Oregon played a heck of a game. No turnovers. Very few penalties. You got to tip your hat to them. Great game.
Would you say that if only 4 got into the playoffs?
It's a little bit easier for me to say, given the expanded playoffs. A little bit easier for me to tip my cap. I might have been a little bit more irritated if it was going to be harder to make it into the playoffs.
You'd rather save the win for the next time you play them.
Exactly. I'm pretty confident the Buckeyes are going to make it into the playoffs, but it was a great game. Just all the way around. It was exciting up until the very last second, and it was wonderful. Cannot say the same about the Browns on Sunday, but maybe this is the week against the Bengals that we'll see a little bit of a comeback and we'll have something more positive to talk about next Monday night at 8. I hope you join us. Thanks to everyone who hung out with us in the chat. Thanks for all your questions. Thanks to Core Home Fitness for sponsoring. Thanks to Fred for his wisdom. We hope to see you again next Monday night at 8 p.m. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all. Thanks for tuning in.